What do you do when the company your father built is starting to feel like it's no longer yours? Rylan O'Connor hadn't asked himself that question until about 6 weeks ago. He'd inherited the 16-location frozen food store chain 2 years back when his dad passed. At 38, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history. The stores had a loyal customer base, solid profits, and a familiar family name. But lately, the emails piling up in his inbox didn't sit right. A customer in Fairview said her elderly mother was ignored at the register. An employee from the Midtown store wrote anonymously about being forced to work through her breaks. And last week, a handwritten letter arrived from someone in the North Point branch. No name. Just, they treat us like machines. We work scared. Rylan had gone through the motions, asked the district manager to look into it, requested reports. But every reply came back the same. Everything's under control. That phrase started to feel like a lie. So he came up with a plan. Shave the beard, add fake acne scars, glasses, and a new name, Kyle. He'd apply as a temp stockroom trainee through a hiring agency they used for seasonal help. No one at store level had ever met him in person. That was the beauty and the curse of being the owner of a corporate-style business. You were both everywhere and nowhere at once. He picked the North Point location. The letter had been short, but something about it stuck with him. The manager there, Damon, had been with the company for 8 years. Clean record. But Rylan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first day, he walked in wearing a navy hoodie, jeans, and cheap sneakers. No one blinked. Damon barely looked up from his tablet when he said, "You the agency guy?"
Kyle, right? Cool.
"Go find Sarah. She'll show you the ropes." Sarah Ortega was the team lead for the backroom crew. Mid-20s, sharp eyes, and a quiet but calm energy. She nodded at Rylan and handed him a pair of gloves. "We're short 2 people today, so it's going to be fast-paced. Just keep up, and if you're not sure, ask." Rylan respected how she didn't waste time. She didn't treat him like a burden. She worked hard lifting, organizing, labeling. He watched how she helped an older employee restack a toppled pallet without saying a word, just doing it. By midweek, Rylan's back ached, and his hands were raw from the freezer bins. He'd forgotten what real labor felt like. Sarah was always the first one in, and the last one to leave. She never complained. But he noticed things: she skipped breaks, never had lunch, and always seemed on edge when Damon walked by. Then, on Thursday afternoon, a delivery came in late. Everyone was scrambling to get it sorted. Rylan was breaking open boxes when Sarah suddenly disappeared. No one seemed to notice. He found her 15 minutes later. She was sitting on an overturned crate in the walk-in freezer, back turned, shoulders shaking. Her gloved hands were covering her face. He started to step back, thinking maybe she needed space. But then he heard the freezer door open behind him and Damon's voice cut through the cold. "I don't care if your mom is sick again," Damon snapped. "You're not leaving early. You either stay or don't come back at all." Rylan froze. Sarah didn't say anything. She just wiped her face with her sleeve and nodded. Damon didn't even wait for a response. He turned and walked out, letting the door slam behind him. Rylan stood there for a second, unsure. His heart was racing. That wasn't a manager being tough, that was someone kicking someone already down. He stepped forward slowly and said, "Hey, you okay?" She looked up, startled. Her eyes were red, her breath visible in the cold air.
Saw the...
Just needed a minute. "You don't have to explain," he said gently. "That wasn't right." Sarah shook her head. "It's fine. I can't afford to lose this job. My mom's on chemo. I'm doing what I can." Rylan felt something twist in his gut. He wanted to rip off the disguise right then. But he knew he could not yet. So he did the only thing he could in that moment. He sat down beside her. In the freezing cold. No words. Just silence. And the decision was made. The moment he walked out of that freezer, this store would never be the same again. Friday came with a biting wind and low gray skies. Rylan arrived before the sun, just as the first truck was pulling in behind the store. He kept his hood up and his head down, but his thoughts were loud. He hadn't expected to feel this angry. What he saw in the freezer wasn't just a bad day, it was a pattern. Sarah wasn't breaking down over one conversation. That was a crack in a dam that had been holding for too long. And Damon's tone hadn't been rushed or accidental. It was practiced. Automatic. Like he'd said it a dozen times in different ways. Inside, the store lights buzzed to life. The tile floors were still damp from the overnight mop. Rylan made his way to the back, where Sarah was already unloading crates. She didn't look up. "You didn't have to come early," she said after a moment, still shifting boxes. "We rotate mornings." "I couldn't sleep," he replied, grabbing a box beside her. "Felt like moving." She gave a tired nod, but didn't say more. Her eyes were puffy, and her movements slower than usual. The silence between them wasn't awkward, more like a truce neither of them had the energy to break. Mid-morning, Damon called a team huddle. Or rather, he barked from the register area for everyone to get over here now. Rylan followed behind the others. There were 8 employees on shift, all gathered near the stockroom entrance. Damon stood with his arms crossed, phone in one hand, and a clipboard in the other. Corporate sending someone next week to do a surprise audit. They didn't say when he began. "So, I want this place spotless. That means no mistakes, no late breaks, and no leaning against walls like you've got nothing better to do." A young guy near the back shifted uncomfortably. Damon's eyes locked on him. "Something funny, Kevin?" "No," Kevin said quickly. "Then pick up the pace today." That back freezer looked like a junkyard last night. Rylan glanced sideways and saw Sarah flinch slightly. He knew she'd stayed late to clean that space. Damon looked around. "And for the last time, no phones. I catch anyone texting. I'll cut your hours, I don't care who you are." The group dispersed in silence. No one said a word. Rylan followed Kevin back toward the loading dock. "He's worse when corporate's watching," Kevin muttered under his breath, once they were out of earshot. "Last time they did a surprise visit, he docked my hours because I asked for a stool to rest my leg. I had stress fractures from the freezer shifts." "You serious?" Rylan asked, keeping his voice low. Kevin nodded. "Didn't matter. Said I needed to toughen up." They kept working, but Rylan's thoughts were already racing. He noticed another thing: half the team was under 30, and none of them looked like they'd been trained properly. Everyone just mimicked what Sarah did. She was constantly helping, correcting errors, and doing the work of 2 people. At noon, Damon disappeared into the office for over an hour. Rylan peeked in once while walking past. The manager was at his desk, watching a basketball game on his phone with his feet up. That afternoon, a woman named Patrice came in for her shift. She was in her 50s, wore a back brace, and moved with care. Rylan hadn't spoken to her before, but she gave him a friendly nod. Sarah walked over and whispered, "She's only supposed to do register and light stocking. Doctor's orders." But within 20 minutes, Damon came out and told her to help in the back freezer. "No one gets special treatment," he said flatly. "You're not here to babysit the register." "I'm not saying I won't help," Patrice said calmly. "Just that I can't lift the 40-pound crates." "You want to work here or not?" Damon snapped. She hesitated. "This isn't safe for me." Damon stepped closer. "Then maybe you should rethink if this job's a good fit." Rylan felt his jaw tighten. He stepped forward instinctively, but Sarah caught his sleeve. "Don't. He'll take it out on her," she whispered. Patrice eventually walked back to the register, lips pressed thin. Damon muttered something under his breath and went back to the office. By the end of the shift, the entire crew looked drained. Sarah was holding her lower back, Kevin was limping again, and Patrice sat down the moment her register line cleared. Rylan stayed behind to help close, watching as everyone did double duty without a word of complaint. It wasn't just bad management, it was damage, spread across every shift. Saturdays started worse. A customer at checkout was short $3. She was elderly, trying to buy frozen vegetables and a box of instant soup. The cashier, a teenager named Liana, looked unsure. "We could put something back," she offered gently. The woman hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "I need the soup for my husband. He's not well." Damon, who had been walking past, stopped and said, "If she can't pay, she can leave. We're not a charity." Liana looked shocked. "So did the customer." "I was going to cover it," Liana said quietly. "You're not allowed to do that," Damon snapped. "It's a policy violation." "No, it's not," Rylan said, stepping forward. His voice cut through the tension. Damon turned. "Excuse me? I read the handbook. It says employees can cover small amounts under $5. Management just has to log it for records." Damon narrowed his eyes. "You think you know more than me? You've been here, what, for days?" "I know what I read," Rylan replied. There was a long pause. Damon's jaw worked, but he didn't say anything else. He turned and walked off. After the customer left, Liana looked at Rylan and whispered, "Thanks. He scares everyone." "Has anyone reported him to HR?" She shook her head. "He deletes complaints." Sarah tried once. She said they never followed up. Rylan's stomach turned. That meant the problem wasn't just Damon. It was the structure that let him operate unchecked. That night, he stayed late again, helping Sarah inventory expired stock. She looked exhausted, but methodical. After a while, he asked, "Why do you stay?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Because someone has to take care of the others. And because I don't have the luxury to walk away." She looked up at him. "You ever work somewhere and feel like if you left, the whole thing would fall apart on people who can't afford for it to?" He nodded slowly. "I think about quitting almost every day," she added. "But then I look at Liana or Kevin or Patrice and I stay." Rylan didn't know what to say. Not as Kyle, but as Rylan O'Connor, CEO of this company. He knew exactly what needed to happen next. Monday morning, he wouldn't be clocking in through the temp agency. He'd be walking through the front doors in a press suit, beside corporate security and compliance officers, with a list of names and a folder of statements. And he wouldn't be leaving until everything changed. At exactly 7:42 a.m. On Monday, Rylan O'Connor stepped through the automatic doors of the North Point store, no hoodie, no gloves, no glasses. A dark charcoal suit, pressed white shirt, and polished shoes made it clear he wasn't here to stock shelves. Behind him walked two members of corporate compliance and a human resources auditor. They didn't speak as they moved through the store. They didn't need to. Every step had already been planned. The assistant manager at the front, a man named Neil, looked up from the register and froze mid-scan when he saw them. His confusion was immediate. "Can I help you?" Rylan didn't stop walking. "Where's Damon?" "In the office, I think," Neil said cautiously.
Good.
"Let's not waste any time." The office door opened without a knock. Damon looked up from the desk, his phone in hand and a half-eaten breakfast sandwich on the keyboard. His eyes darted from Rylan to the others behind him. "Can I ask who?" "You can stand up," Rylan said.
Now.
Damon pushed back his chair slowly. "What's going on?"
I'm Rylan O'Connor. Also.
"And I've spent the last 5 days working your stockroom under the name Kyle." The blood drained from Damon's face, and he took half a step backward. Look, if there's been some misunderstanding, there's no misunderstanding," Rylan said. "You've created a work environment that violates policy, basic decency, and in multiple ways the law. Effective immediately, you're terminated. You'll be escorted out, and your access to all systems is revoked." Damon opened his mouth, but no sound came out. One of the compliance officers moved beside him. "You can collect your things. We'll walk you out." Rylan turned and stepped into the hallway. Already, Word had spread. Employees were peeking around corners, whispering. Kevin was frozen near the stockroom, a cart of canned goods beside him. Liana stood behind the lottery counter, wide-eyed. Patrice had paused mid-swipe at her register, her fingers resting on the keypad. Sarah wasn't on shift yet. Rylan faced the stunned crew. "I'm not here to make a speech," he said. "But I owe you all an explanation." He waited until they were fully focused. "I went undercover because I didn't trust the reports I was getting. I didn't believe that a store with this many good people could be struggling so badly without someone allowing it to happen. I was right. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it for myself." He turned to Neil. "Call in the floor leads. We're shutting down for the day." Neil hesitated. "You mean close the store?"
Yes.
"Everyone gets paid. But this place doesn't reopen until we fix what's broken." By 9 a.m., the store was locked and the lights dimmed. The team gathered in the break room, where food had been brought in from a local cafe. Simple sandwiches, fruit, and coffee. Rylan stood at the front, not as a symbol, not above them, but present. A corporate HR rep named Lila stepped forward. "Everything you say today is confidential. No retaliation will be tolerated. We'll be having one-on-one sessions over the next 2 days to hear your experiences directly. No filters."
No scripts.
Rylan watched as employees exchanged glances, some skeptical, others cautious. Kevin was the first to speak, before the meetings even started. "Are you really going to listen?" he asked. "Because we've said things before. Nothing ever changed." "You have my word," Rylan said. "And this time, I saw it with my own eyes." The interviews began immediately. Sarah arrived midway through the morning, clearly confused by the locked doors and the absence of Damon. When she was brought into the break room and saw Rylan standing there in a suit, her steps slowed. He walked over. "I'm sorry I didn't say who I was sooner." She studied his face, then gave a small nod. "I figured something was off. You asked too many questions to be a temp." He smiled faintly. "You carried that store on your back." "I don't know how to make that right yet, but I will." She said nothing for a moment. Then, quietly, "I hope so." Her interview lasted nearly an hour. When she left the room, her expression was unreadable, but her shoulders were straighter. By late afternoon, patterns had emerged. Employees described being denied time off for medical issues, hours cut without explanation, and threats of termination for asking basic questions. Liana revealed that she'd been warned not to get soft with customers who needed help. Patrice had been pressured to lift heavy inventory despite clear medical restrictions multiple times. And 2 workers had previously filed complaints with HR that mysteriously never made it past Damon's inbox. The compliance team cross-referenced each case. By evening, they confirmed that at least 4 formal grievances had been deleted or never submitted. Rylan called an emergency leadership meeting via video conference with regional managers and legal. Actions were swift. Damon's access was revoked across all platforms. A formal investigation was launched into communication breakdowns between store-level and corporate HR. And a new interim manager was assigned, Clarice Miller, a 32-year veteran known for rebuilding high-pressure teams. She arrived the next morning. Clarice wore worn boots and a faded company fleece. She didn't introduce herself with a speech. She walked the store, asked names, and listened. In the break room, she sat next to Patrice, not across from her. She asked Kevin what he needed to heal his foot. She scheduled a private meeting with Sarah. Rylan stayed for all of it. He didn't leave after the reveal. He cleared his schedule for the week. Every morning, he met with 3 employees. Every afternoon, he walked the floor with Clarice. He saw how neglected equipment slowed work. He approved new freezer carts and ergonomic mats. He replaced broken handhelds. He authorized overtime pay for the backlog caused by short staffing. But he didn't rush change. He knew the damage took time to build, and it would take time to undo it. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah approached him in the break room. She held a folded sheet of paper. "This is my notice," she said. 2 weeks. Rylan's stomach dropped. "Can I ask why?" She hesitated. "Not because of you. Or Clarice. Honestly, this is the first time I felt like someone's actually listening. But I've been running on empty for too long. I need to take care of my mom. And myself." Rylan nodded slowly. "You deserve that. But I want to offer you something." She waited. "We're creating a new position. Employee Advocacy Coordinator. It'll be part-time, remote, flexible. You'd work directly with HR to review complaints and make sure nothing gets buried again. No manager can block your access. You'd be a second set of eyes. A real one." She looked stunned. "Why me?" "Because you never abandon the people around you, even when the system failed." She didn't say yes right away, but she didn't say no either. That evening, Kevin stayed late to help the closing crew. Patrice worked her full shift without being asked to lift anything heavier than a scanner. Liana wore a small pin that said, "Kindness is strength." None of them said it aloud, but the change was tangible. Not fixed, not whole, but real. Before leaving that night, Rylan stood outside the store, watching the lights flicker off one by one. The cold wind brushed his face, just like the day he'd first walked in pretending to be someone else. This time, he was exactly who he said he was. And the people inside finally had someone who saw them. The following Monday, the store reopened its doors under new protocol. The window signs that once promoted weekly frozen specials had been replaced with a simple message: "Under new leadership. Same service. A better place to work." It wasn't a marketing ploy. It was a promise. Rylan stood near the front, not as a formality, but because he wanted to see what happened when the day unfolded without fear in the air. Clarice greeted employees by name as they arrived. She carried a small notepad in her back pocket, jotting down things that needed fixing: sticky freezer doors, poor lighting near the walk-in, gaps in the stocking schedule. Sarah didn't show up. She had accepted the new role, but her first day wasn't until the following week. She'd asked for 1 week off to care for her mother. Rylan approved it without hesitation. Inside, the rhythm of the store had changed. Kevin now worked mornings with a boot support and a reduced load. Clarice had reworked the scheduling to rotate freezer duty in shorter shifts. Kevin passed by Rylan near the end of the first hour and gave a quiet nod. "Didn't think I'd be back," he said, adjusting a box of frozen meals onto the shelf. "But I like the way Clarice does things. Doesn't bark. Just asks." "She gets it," Rylan replied. "She's built stores from the floor up more times than I can count." Liana was training a new cashier, a young man named Jordan who had transferred from a different location. She explained the register interface with precise calm, occasionally glancing up to make sure her next customer wasn't waiting too long. Jordan asked, "So it's true? The CEO worked here undercover?" Liana glanced toward Rylan, then back at him.
"Yeah."
"And he didn't pretend to help. He actually did the work." Jordan shook his head. "Wild." Behind them, Patrice rang up a customer who had mobility issues. She placed the lighter bags closer to the front of the cart, keeping the weight balanced. It was a small gesture, but for the first time in weeks, she wasn't grimacing with each scan. Near the back, Rylan joined Clarice just as she was reviewing the new delivery logs. "We've still got a gap in midweek staffing," she said, flipping through a clipboard. "I'd like to bring in 2 part-timers who can learn fast and won't burn out on freezer shifts." "Do it," Rylan said.
Temporary or permanent.
"Let's start with 90-day contracts. See how they fit." She moved on to a note about inventory shrinkage. Damon had never done proper tracking on returned items. Clarice had already separated damaged stock and assigned one of the overnight crew to verify counts before they got logged. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered. Midday, Rylan pulled aside Neil, the assistant manager, who had kept quiet during the transition. I want to hear where you're at, Rylan said. You've seen a lot here. Neil looked unsure. I wasn't part of what Damon did, if that's what you're asking. I'm not accusing you, Rylan said. But you were second in command. You had eyes on things I couldn't. Neil exhaled. I let some things slide. Nothing abusive, but I didn't push back when I should have. Felt like if I did, I'd be next. Do you want to stay in this role? Neil hesitated. Only if I can be better than I was before. Good, Rylan said. Because if I see the old patterns, I won't hesitate. But if you're ready to lead right, I want you here. Neil nodded once. I am. By 2 o'clock, the store was steady. Lines moved, shelves were stocked, and no one was rushing through breaks. Rylan didn't stay in the office. He walked the aisles, listened, and helped where he could. When a pallet jack got stuck near the back, he was the first to help reposition it. When a customer asked where to find gluten-free frozen pasta, he didn't point, he walked them there. Later that afternoon, an HR representative named Marla arrived to begin training on-site advocates across several branches. Sarah's new role would eventually grow into a team. Rylan introduced her to Clarice and outlined the structure. Each store will have a direct line to a coordinator, he explained. If something can't be resolved internally, it goes to HR immediately. No more filters. No more missing files. Clarice asked, "What's the escalation timeline?" 72 hours, Marla said. And every complaint gets written confirmation of receipt. Clarice nodded. That'll change everything. At 5, the store began to slow. The last of the afternoon rush trickled out. Kevin was stretching near the dock, and Liana was wrapping up her drawer count. Rylan called a brief team meeting in the break room, not formal, just a circle of chairs and a few cups of coffee. I'm not going to pretend today fixed everything, he began. But it's a start. And I'm not going to disappear again. Patrice asked, Are you visiting other stores?
Yes.
Every week, I'll be walking a different floor. No warning.
No shoot.
Just me listening. Jordan laughed. So, you're making Undercover a regular thing? Rylan smiled. Not always undercover, but visible, accountable. Clarice added, and we're building a leadership mentorship for floor staff. Those who want to grow into management can shadow me and Neil.
No favoritism. No gatekeeping.
Liana raised her hand. Can we suggest topics for that? Absolutely, Clarice said. We'll build it around what you need, not what looks good on paper. The group broke into quiet conversation. No one rushed out. For the first time in a long while, the back room felt like a place people didn't want to leave immediately. As the last of the staff filed out, Rylan stepped outside into the early evening air. The parking lot was mostly empty. A few birds wheeled overhead in the dimming sky. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Mom's treatment went well today. Thanks for the space. I'll be ready next Monday. He replied simply, We'll be better because of you. He pocketed the phone and looked back at the store. It wasn't perfect.
It never would be. But it was honest now.
And that mattered. He walked to his car, not out of obligation, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had finally seen what mattered most. Not profits. Not appearances.
People.
And now they had a voice.